Film criticism is a field that seems to be growing more and more, especially with the internet and YouTube giving people further opportunities to share their thoughts on both new and classic movies. And with this, I think it's important to create a dialogue around what is proper film criticism, as too often I see many use movie criticism as a way to lash insults at filmmakers, and that creates a bad image for that style of film watching. Film criticism is so important as it's a way to engage in the medium and understand what makes some movies work and what makes some movies not work. It's also a helpful way to formulate your own tastes and maybe open yourself up to movies you might not otherwise watch. So I decided to make this special video to properly explain my own critical ideologies and hopefully lead to larger dialogue on the subject. So let's start with a particularly important rule. Don't insult and attack the filmmakers. This probably seems like an obvious one, as why would anyone go after the people who made the movie? They put their heart and soul into it after all, regardless of whether they're a big blockbuster director, are making a $10,000 independent film, or are directing a mid-budget romantic comedy or horror movie. However, too often you'll see negative reviews of a movie that lash out at the director, or writer, or the actors. It is absolutely acceptable to have problems with a movie you've seen, whether you thought it was tonally off, the story was not well constructed, or the messages were misplaced. A large part of art criticism in general is looking at a piece of work and thinking, I disagree with the creative choices being made, and that's great. But then you have some people who watch a movie they hate and think it's acceptable to say the director should never work again, or that their parents should be ashamed of them, or call them horrible things like hacks. They're not hacks, they're people with actual human emotions. Nobody likes to be insulted or said horrible things to, regardless of their net worth or how famous they are. All a director did was make a piece of art you did not like. It's not the end of the world. I recently watched the Netflix comedy Wine Country, which I did not like at all. I thought it was unfunny and boring with barely developed characters. I said as much when I reviewed the movie. But do you know what I did not do? Insult Amy Poehler. I may not have liked Wine Country, but that does not make her a horrible person. And she still took the time and the effort to handle pre-production, film the movie, and then supervise the final edit. I only spent 2 hours watching Wine Country, as opposed to her working on the film for many months. She went out there and made a movie, and I respect that dedication. And who knows, maybe I'll prefer her next one, which brings me to my next point. Don't hold a grudge against a director. Just because you disliked a previous director's work does not mean you will forever hate everything they do. For instance, I absolutely detested The Killing of a Sacred Deer, so you might logically think I'll hate everything made by Yorgos Lanthimos. But when I walked into The Favorite, I put that other film behind me. This was a new movie, a new experience, and you know what? I really liked The Favorite. To use another recent example, Adam McKay's work has long left me cold. I've never found his comedies that amusing, and I was even underwhelmed by The Big Short. But with Vice, I still walked in with the same adage I had with The Favorite. New movie, new experience. And I ended up really liking Vice. Would I still have liked it if I walked in with arms crossed and with a grudge against Mr. McKay? It's hard to say. The next point I want to make is don't review the audience. I know this seems like a strange point to make, but plenty of times I've read a review where the reviewer talks about how someone 3 rows down was reacting to the movie. 1, why are you not paying attention to the screen? And 2, if I'm reading your review, it's because I want to know what you thought of the film, not Jimmy 3 rows down. Oftentimes, when the rest of the audience is mentioned in a review, there's a skewed bias to back up their own opinion. Like with a comedy, someone might write, the entire audience was completely silent, or the always classic, everyone in my audience hated it. I rarely read someone write when the audience has the exact opposite opinion. Unless you work for CinemaScore and poll everyone afterwards, you won't really know what everyone's individual thoughts were on the film you just watched. Speaking of, don't insult the audience either. You often see in discussions of things like Adam Sandler comedies or the Transformers series a temptation to criticize the audience who supports these films. It's one thing to criticize those movies, it's another matter entirely to go after people who like them and call them morons or worse. If someone likes a movie I dislike, I think it's wonderful they were able to get enjoyment from the movie and they felt they got their money's worth. Don't turn your nose up because the general audience had fun watching a certain movie. There was a lot of this snobby elitism, believe it or not, when The Sound of Music became a much-cherished audience favorite, with a few upper-crust critics calling people simpletons because they liked Julie Andrews singing catchy songs over beautiful Swiss scenery. What a strange thing to get huffy about. One thing that personally bothers me is when a review will say the filmmakers put no effort. Really, that movie they spent many months, sometimes years putting together, was done with no effort. Unless you were actually there on set or in the studio and saw the filmmakers at work, that's a really large assumption to make. It's a little hard to make a movie while lying on a hammock. Lastly, I want to bring up two phrases I frequently hear or see whenever somebody calls out bad media criticism, both of which I can speak from personal experience. One is, that's called criticism. There's a difference between actual constructive film criticism and just being mean. Criticism should be about saying, here's what could be better, or here's what did not quite work for me, rather than, this is garbage, they should go back to film school, and other comments that don't help anyone. David Lean, the world-renowned director of Brief Encounter and Lawrence of Arabia, actually took a 14-year hiatus from filmmaking because critics hurled insults at him for Ryan's daughter.
They're very good with their tongues, and I was there for about 2 hours. And Pauline Kael's is pretty sharp-tongued, and they just took me to bits.
That was not criticism. They were just being cruel, and we probably missed out on some great films from Mr. Lean during those 14 years. The other phrase is, oh, they're just being blunt. Again, there's a difference between being truthful with one's opinion and being unnecessarily vicious. Not liking a movie does not give you the excuse to be a bully, and I've seen so much unprofessional critique getting a pass because of so-called bluntness. Olivia Munn and Anthony Rapp recently called out what they felt was bad media criticism, and they got so many responses with those two phrases. I want to say there are many great critics out there, those who are professional, have respect for the filmmakers and their contributions to cinema. Even when they don't like a movie, they can write about why it did not work for them in clever, non-insulting ways. I certainly have my fair share of critics I like reading and listening to. Those are not critics I always agree with, and that's great. I read or watch them because I'm curious to see their thoughts, insights, and analysis of a given work. They can bring something up in a movie that can make me appreciate it on an additional level, or bring my attention to a smaller film that might have gone past my radar. The critics whose criticisms and remarks make me uncomfortable, I just choose to ignore them. It's not worth letting their cruelness and cynicism get to me. Like I said, I would like to see an open dialogue about what film criticism should and shouldn't do, and I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.